Hey, Nikki here with Beauty J'adore and Aviano Bags with my latest bag, which is the Salerno bag. And I know I say this all the time, but I'm in love. I am. So listen, I have just a few notes because I listen. And so there's a few things that's really important to know about not just this bag, but all of my bags. They can be made on a domestic sewing machine. They can. It's just a certain way that you need to build the inside if you're not using a leather, a heavier weight leather, or just some type of heavy fabric that would really require a heavy duty machine. So this bag from beginning to end is going to be made on a domestic sewing machine. It's my old, it's so old. I need a new one. Bernina B530. It's over 10 years old, I believe. And so is it the best machine? Absolutely not, but it gets the job done. So from beginning to end, we're going to sew this bag. Now there's certain aspects of the bag we're not going to be able to sew, but if you have a home sewing machine that allows you to kind of get into the crevices, you will be able to kind of sew the gusset. But if not, don't worry, because what I did, I walked you through how we inserted the gusset with E6000, and we didn't need to sew it. But it's perfect. It really is. So a few things that's really important. Okay, one is you need to make sure you have a leather sewing needle. You need to make sure you have a leather sewing needle. Very important. Another thing, you need to make sure you change the the stitch length from 4.0. Why am I speaking like this today? To from a 4.0 through like maybe a 4.3, just to be on the safe side. Because even when you think about it, when you have a bag, particularly like a higher end bag, you don't have like this little 2.5 stitch length. You have a longer stitch length. It just makes it so much easier to actually sew. And it looks good. It just looks good. Now, in terms of the stabilizer, you can use stabilizers when you're sewing on a domestic machine. You just have to make sure you use, or you put those stabilizers that you're using, you put it toward the middle of the bag, and you're leaving the outside, you're leaving this free to stitch. So even with this, there is the stabilizer that's in here. There's a stabilizer in here. There's also stabilizer on the back. And again, this was made on a domestic sewing machine. It's just a matter of how you build it in. So with all the stabilizers, the heat bond, the canvas, everything that's made within this bag, I left this edge here all the way around free to stitch. So keep that in mind. It's really important. In terms of everything that you will need, of course, the heat bond, the stabilizer, the canvas, the hardware. I will link the hardware where you get the hardware right on Amazon, not an issue. And it comes in this little kit with a few extra pieces so that if you want to make another bag, you have the option to do that as well. You're going to need your glue, your double-sided tape, your X-Acto knife, your awl, and that's just to kind of like punch your holes. If you don't already have these tools, an awl, you can get an awl for like maybe $3 or $4. The Chicago screws, punch kit, if you want to invest in a punch kit, it's like $20-$30. It's well worth it. It is makes punching holes in heavier fabrics a lot easier. Is it necessary? No, it's not. So keep that in mind as well. So also, I have a tutorial for of the patcher machine, which is the hand cranked machine that I've shown you guys before. It's really good. But if you don't want to go through that hurdle of trying to figure out how do I use this, then scrap it. It's 99 bucks. It's not going to kill you, but just keep that in mind. So what else do we need? Of course, the pattern. So the pattern, I believe, has 16 pieces. I know that sounds like a lot, but I promise you it's not. So the majority is going to be the smaller pieces. So you have the strap, you have this strap that's around here. And let me undo this. You have the belt loop strap that's in here. You have the bottom, and then a lot of those pieces also are the stabilizers as well. So just because I didn't want to confuse you to say, okay, well, cut your own stabilizer here, or cut your own stabilizer there. Now, during the making of the tutorial, I did add extra stiffener through the front and the back, and kind of throughout this portion as well. Just because I thought, okay, maybe I don't need it. So when I started the tutorial, it was just with the basic stabilizers. So going through that process, make sure you have extra stabilizer on hand, because I did add extra stabilizer. But again, I walked you through that, the whole process of adding the stabilizer, gluing it in, so on and so forth. Now, this bag comes with, the pattern comes with this shoulder strap, which is a 38-inch length shoulder strap. Now, if you want a longer shoulder strap, make sure you cut that prior, because this one only has a 38-inch. And the good thing about it is that you can make it longer. And hi, can you shut your door, please? So you can make it longer, and then just kind of stick it in there, which is so good. So if you want it longer, you can wear it as like a crossbody, or just a longer bag, or you can almost do it like under here, make it shorter. Again, it's your choice, but out the box, it's 38 inches long. This one, I made it, this one is 60 inches long, so it's a lot longer. You can kind of put this part inside, because you have like these little belt loops, which makes it very helpful. But yeah, so you have the hardware. Again, this hardware is really cute, really good. It's easy to put together, and it's just like a cool little bag. Let me see, did I miss anything else? I don't believe so. Yes, I will touch on what I'm using. I'm using this suede, which is just beautiful. I actually got this suede at, I think, like Scrap Be More. It was like a big piece that I got, but it's not light, but it's not heavy. But it's just really nice. It makes for a really good bag. I will tell you, Tandy leather, I'm a fan of Tandy, and I think I'm a fan only because, honestly, their customer service is really good, and they are very near me. So there is another fabric or leather place. It is called Springfield Leather. Springfield Leather has good leather as well, and the prices are really good. So keep that in mind if you want to kind of dig into getting some suede. And if you have any questions, if you want to know if there's some suede or leather that I think will fit through your domestic machine, just reach out to me. I'll let you know. But yes, so also the inside of the bag. So it's not one of the drop-in linings, so keep that in mind. It's built into the outer part of the bag as well, so you can kind of see in there. Also, there is a zipper that's built into it as well, so you do have a zipper pouch, but it's just a cool little bag, and I hope that I'm taking kind of like the nervousness out of making it at home, because yes, I do have like heavier duty machines that I like to work with, but they can also be done with just a regular $100 machine as well. So if you have any questions, any comments, any concerns, let me know. Let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is pretty much go through everything you're going to need. And this bag is going to be made strictly off of just a domestic sewing machine. So I'm using a Bernina B530, which is very old, like old. Most newer machines come with more features, which aren't honestly really necessary. But this is just to kind of show you, because I know a lot of people have had questions, because I make the majority of my bags on either the hand crank machine, which I will link that machine. It's like a $99 leather machine. It takes some finessing, but it's really good once you get it to work the way you want it to work. But I'll link that because I did do a review on that machine. But this one's going to be used strictly off of my Bernina and not my Cellrite, which I use majority of the time. Okay, so this is what you will need. Of course, the pattern and cutout. I've already cut my pattern out and I've stabilized it, and I will go through that process as well. So the black bag that I just showed you, it was made using a heavier leather. Let's see, which is this leather that I just dyed black, but it's significantly heavier. It would not fit through this Bernina. But if you have a heavier duty machine, it will. But I'm going to show you where you can use a suede, even a leather that's not quite as thick as this, but the way you can stabilize. So especially with this suede, it's not very thick. If you can see here, the edge, it's not. But when I put the bag together, I'll show you how to stabilize it to make it look like it's a lot more substantial than it actually is. And it'll allow you to sew it with your home machine. Okay, so first of all, let's go ahead, and you want to make sure you have all your pieces cut out. And I will run through those. So you have your front flap, and on all the pattern pieces, it's going to be labeled. It's going to be labeled internal or external. So we're going to look at the internal as being kind of like the lining, but not necessarily with a lining type fabric. So we have the front flap, which is piece number 1, internal. This is the front, which is the internal. The external front flap. So these are basically the same two pieces, but the markings, and we'll go through the markings as well. The markings are going to be different. And then you have the external front, the back, external. And so this is the internal. So essentially it's the back, but it's also kind of like the covering for the zipper. So you're only going to have one back external that looks like this, and the other is the back internal. And this internal is going to be slightly shorter than the external. You can see here. Let's see, can you see it? Yeah, so it's slightly shorter. This is just a sample that I'm going to run through just so that you can see that it can be made on this machine. And so these are pretty much the entire like inner components of what this is going to look like. And then we have the bottom. So the bottom is coming with 2 pieces. This is the external bottom, and with the heat bond on the external. So these two are going to go together. And this is the inside, the internal bottom. So for the gusset, you need 4 pieces. You need 4 pieces of the gusset, as well as kind of like, it's not really a stabilizer. It is the canvas that is, it's essentially meant to stabilize it, but it's not going to make it hard. It's just going to give it some rigidity. So we need 4 pieces, and then we need 2 pieces of the canvas. This is the zipper pouch. So this will be the actual pouch that will sit over
the zipper, kind of like this. And then the zipper is going to fit in this space here. We're going to need 2 of the straps. So with the 2 straps, and all of this is going to depend on if you're going to need the stabilizers, and the stiffeners are going to depend on the thickness of your leather. So if you're basing this strictly off of, let's sew on a regular home sewing machine, then you're going to need this, which is the stiffener. So if you have a heavier piece of leather and you're using a heavier duty machine, you don't need to use this. So with the black bag, I did not add any stabilizer to the handle. So just keep that in mind. But because this is suede, it's very thin and loose, we will need to do a stabilizer just to give it kind of like some heart to it. You have the flap stabilizer. Of course, this is going to go on the flap portion. And as you can see, this flap stiffener is a bit smaller. So I took about 1/4 of an inch off the edge all the way around. Because of course, when we position this, we want to make sure that we position it so that it is away from the edge. Because when we stitch, we're going to stitch around the edge. We don't want to catch this stiffener because that's where the problem is going to come in terms of, is your machine going to be able to go through this? And it will struggle a bit depending on what type of machine you have. So we want to make sure we cut this off. Now, the actual pattern, it's already cut off, so don't worry about that. Just go ahead and cut the stiffener as is. And on the actual pattern, it shows you kind of like a guide of where to put the stiffener. And we're going to end up gluing the stiffener on, so don't worry about that. So then you have the top stiffener. And we also have a positioning on the other piece of pattern that's going to show you where to actually put the top stiffener. And then you have, of course, the bottom stiffener, so which is going to fit between these 2 pieces here that I showed you earlier. So essentially it's going to fit right here. And we did the same thing. We reduced the size around the perimeter so that when we go to stitch, we won't hit the stiffener. So you have the little strap that goes around the bag. We're going to put 2 pieces together along with a stabilizer, again, because this fabric is a lot thinner. If you have heavier fabric, like what I did with the black one, in fact, with the black bag, I didn't even put 2 pieces together. I just used 1 piece of leather. So again, it's all going to depend on the thickness of the material that you're using. So for this one, we're going to put these 2 together and then stitch. Of course, it's half the size. So when I go to stitch around, I won't hit the stabilizer that's in the middle. So we have 2 of these, and that's going to be the strap that's going to hold the hardware together on the front of the bag. And then you have, with glue on them already, 4 pieces. And this is going to be for the loops that we cut on the inside of the bag. So on the internal front flap, you're going to have these markings here. So what's going to happen is, I'm showing you this on the wrong side, but it'll be on the other side. So they'll pretty much sit like this. And so your strap is going to run the inside of your bag through these little loopholes out the outside of the bag. So I'll run through that again because that's probably very confusing for you at this point. Okay, so we have 4 of these. So when it comes to selecting like what type of leather, what type of fabric, with the Aviano bags, I want the bags, I like leather. I like leather, I like suede. It makes to me, a much more luxe bag. But you don't have to do that. So the same process that I'm running you through for stabilizing the suede, you can do the same thing with a regular fabric. So I would definitely recommend using an upholstery fabric because an upholstery fabric has more weight to it. So you can stabilize the upholstery fabric so that it has, you know, it can form into a box. So I would recommend using suede. You don't have to. You can use any fabric that you want. You just have to make sure you stabilize it. And also, if you wanted to do something like maybe use an upholstery fabric for the body of the bag and then maybe for the flap, just use leather or just use suede, I think that would be beautiful. And it kind of takes away a lot of the fear of dealing with leather, if that is the case, even with the Tutoria tote. So if you've seen that tote, which I love it so much, that tote is made for the most part with the fabric that's on the outside and then kind of like the pieces of leather. So it's the leather in the middle and then it's a leather across the top. So you can do that. You can kind of mix it up. If you want suede and leather, you just have to make sure when you put it together that you are leaving space around the edge, which is where you're going to actually stitch. You can use any fabrication that you want. So we have these cut, and I'll go into more detail as we're going through the sewing process on kind of like the leather, the placement, and so on and so forth. Also, it's really important that you do your markings. And so the markings are going to be, for the most part, on the front flap, and then you have the external front, so the outer front, and the front flap external. And those are, for the most part, just where the markings are going to be. It's not a lot of markings. It's literally the hardware is going to be here. The belt loops are going to be here. And then the hardware that you have on the front and the back of the bag. So I will go through what you need. So you're going to need a zipper. And I think the zipper, let's see how long this is. Okay, this is a 14-inch zipper. So, where's the zipper piece? Okay, so you need your zipper to be able to fit between here. So this that I'm using is a 14-inch zipper. It's going to need to bring this down a bit. Okay, so you could probably get away with a like an 11, 12-inch zipper at a minimum. So just make sure you have a zipper, and whatever zipper you want, as long as it's not in let's see, what is this? The invisible zipper. But any other zipper you want that's going to be easy for you to use, because it's of course going to be on the inside of the bag. Okay, I just want to take a side note. It's snowing right now. It's like legit snowing, and it was 80 degrees yesterday, 80, and it's snowing today. This is insane. Okay, so in addition to all the pieces that we have here, when you go to stabilize it, we'll touch on that. We're going to use canvas to stabilize it. So canvas here, but we're also going to use heat bond. So I affixed the canvas to the suede using the heat bond. So the heat bond is also going to give you some weight to it as well. So keep in mind what I did on all the pieces. I cut heat bond out, and when I cut the heat bond, of course the pattern goes all the way to the edge, but I took about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch off around the edge, and then I put the heat bond, and then I put the canvas. So this is 2 layers. So heat bond, canvas. So when we're going through and stabilizing all the pieces, we want to stabilize just 2 pieces of the gusset. You want to stabilize the bottom. But I didn't, on the bottom, you don't necessarily need to put canvas because we are going to use a stiffener. I used heat bond and canvas on the internal zipper back, which is piece number 9. The back, the front flap, both pieces, the internal and the external. The internal, external of piece number 8. And that is all we did in terms of the heat bond and the canvas. So with the heat bond, there's 2 different types of heat bond. There's a heat bond, like the heavier one, which is the package with the red light, the red writing, and then there's the light. Definitely make sure you get the heavier one, which is the one with the red writing. So you can also pick this up. I know a lot of people used to pick it up at Joann's. I never ended up buying it at Joann's. I always purchased mine at Michael's because you also get a coupon. So I think I paid for this entire roll like $10 and it will last you. So definitely use the heat bond. If you want to stabilize something, give something a little more weight, heat bond, heat bond, heat bond, heat bond. Also, there's 2 types of canvases. This is like a canvas interfacing. This one's kind of hard to get, but what you can use is also this canvas. So the leather bag, I used this canvas, which is slightly heavier. It might be even nicer to use, but I've already gone in with this one. So, and of course you can get this everywhere. They have it as a huge roll on Amazon. That's pretty much, well, right now, that's where you can get it. So I think it's about $10 as well. But again, you're going to get a very large roll and it'll last you forever. So these are the 2 things you are 100% absolutely going to need in terms of trying to make the bag heavier and give you that shape, give you that box shape, and also be able to use it on a domestic sewing machine. Okay, so you're going to need the stiffeners. You're going to need the bottom stiffener, the flap stiffener, and the top stiffener, and of course for the belt. So this is a very heavyweight stiffener. I get mine from Tandy. So if you have a Tandy leather that is near you, I would recommend going into the store as opposed to shipping it online, because I believe this is only like $10 for a very large roll. The roll is big. It will last forever, but they also charge you $11 to ship it. I guess because of the odd shape of it. So if you're near one, you can run in and get one for $10. But if not, you'll have to order it online. But there's another place called Springfield Leather. Their shipping tends to be a bit better. I've never ordered the stiffener from there, but everyone says it's also really good. Now, I know traditionally bag makers use a different type of what they call stiffeners. They're not real stiffeners, honestly. They're very flexible. It's not going to give you any type of stability with your bags. I've seen them a million times and they just don't. So I will also link to where you can get a stiffener online on Amazon. And I'll try to kind of source like a really inexpensive place. And I say Tandy because the stiffeners are $10, but the shipping, if you're not near a Tandy, will kind of be annoying. But if you plan to make more bags, it's well worth it. So I think that is it. So in terms of the hardware, let's move along to the hardware. I will link to a source on Amazon where you can get this hardware. Now it comes with a kit and this isn't all. It comes with actually 2 of these. You're going to need 4. You're going to need 4 of these, 2 for the flap and then 2 for the strap that's going to come around the front of the bag like this. And then you're going to need kind of like these little loops to where the belt, it's going to attach in the back like so, and then reach around the front to the other like little loops. So you're going to need 4 of these. So the kit comes with all of this and then another set of this. I believe it comes with this one and 2 more of these, which is actually nice because you have options to use it and make another bag. And that is going to run you, I believe it's $15 for this whole set of hardware, which isn't really bad. So I'll make sure I link that as well. So you're going to need a leather glue. The glue that I typically buy, it's out of stock, so I'm using this leather glue here. You're going to need double-sided tape, an X-Acto knife, and make sure you have multiple blades because the blades for an X-Acto knife get dull really quickly. So you're going to need a nice variety of the blades. You're going to need an awl or something that you can pierce the suede or whatever fabric you're working with. You need one of these. So for the handle, yep, my microphone came up. Okay, so for the handle, you're going to have to place a hole in the handle and you're going to have to put screws in. So you can use whatever rivets that you have handy. I use the screw-in rivets, which I'll show you. Okay, so I use these brass Chicago screws, which I absolutely love them. So this is going to be for the handle. So you're going to need 2 of these. I will also link a few sources to where you can get these. But if you don't want to do that and you don't want the hardware, the screws on the handle, you can also just stitch across the handle. That's an option as well. But you're also going to need a way to actually punch a hole in the handle. Now you can do it with your awl. It just takes more work. So you don't have to go and buy a punch kit. I use this punch kit because I use it repeatedly. It's really good. It cuts a nice clean hole. But if you don't want to do that, just use an awl or something that you can punch the hole in. So you're also going to need some craft clips. You're going to need a straight ruler, of course scissors, and something that's really important. So in order to sew and for the stitching to be nice and uniform, you're going to need a leather needle. So the leather sewing needle, it's very important. The way the tip is completely different than like if you were sewing with the knit. So you're going to need the leather needle, but you're also going to need to change your stitch length on your machine from somewhere between a 4.0 and a 4.3. Now the stitch length on a bag is very different than the stitch length on clothing. So you want that stitch length to be slightly longer and very uniform. And because it's not like a really short 2.5, it's going to be more visible. So if your machine can handle a heavier thread, I would say go for it. But if not, just kind of stick with the regular cone thread, which is what I'm going to be using. So I think that is it. Now, if I come across something that I left out, I will just make note of it. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Okay, one more thing I wanted to show you before we get started, just to kind of ease your fears when it comes to sewing with a heavier fabric on a domestic machine. So I have this 2 pieces of the suede that we're using. And if you can see, let me put this so that you can see like how thick this is. So it's not thin like a regular fabric, but it's not a heavy weight leather, but it has some weight to it. So we have this, we have the stabilizer, we have the heat bond, and we have the canvas. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and with the heat bond, I'm not sure if you are or aren't familiar with it. It has this like grated part here, and you just simply place it and you iron it. Even on my leather and suede applications, I still use an iron. You just have to be very careful. What I typically do is place a protective sheet or something on top, quickly place the iron and give it a couple steams and then take it off. So I don't actually put the heat on the suede or the leather. So I just put it over here, put a protective cloth, iron, and then take it off. Once you do that, it'll have, and then you peel this part off, it'll have just one like shiny piece. Now that shiny piece, you don't want to touch that with an iron because it will put everything on your iron. So once I do that, I'm then going to place the canvas on top. And then I'm going to place the glue on top of here. I'm going to place some more glue here. And if you look at this, it sandwiches all of that in, but then I'll come back and I'll stitch it just to kind of show you how it works. So for right now, I'm going to go ahead, iron the heat bond on, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I went ahead and I kind of pressed this on. You should wait for it to get cool before you peel it off, but I'm just going to go ahead and go for it. Okay. So once you peel this off, you see it gives you this like little shiny thing on here. This is how you know that this is going to be the sticky part. So once you then place your canvas, and you need to iron this on. So what I should have done, well, I can still do it. You want to make sure whatever you place on top is the same size as kind of like the square heat bond, because if your iron touches the heat bond, it puts a bunch of sticky stuff all over your iron, and it also messes up your base for your heat bond. So I'm just going to eyeball it. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and iron the canvas on top of this heat bond. I'm going to do that and be right back. Okay, so we have the canvas on. And again, when we're doing this, we want to make sure the edges, if we're going to do a full stitch, we want to make sure our edges are free. So I didn't put heat bond on the edge, but I could technically kind of trim that. But this is just as a demonstration. So then we want to take your glue. And the amount of glue you put on, a lot of it's going to depend on your fabric. If you're using just a regular fabric, I would say just use double-sided tape, because you don't want the glue to feed through on the other side. So just kind of lightly put this. So once we do that, I'll go ahead and show you. we're just gonna kind of stitch. Again, you wanna make sure you have your stitch length, either a 4.0, somewhere between a 4.0 and a 4.3. And you're gonna be using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Let me back up here. Okay, so you can see it here. I can kind of write on this just so that you can see the stitching because it's kind of dark. So the stitching's right across the top and the bottom. And I was able to stitch through this. And if you see, this is how stable it made it. It made it very, almost very thick. So you'll see how it's going to react within the bag. And I did this, of course, on a domestic machine. And my needle wasn't trying to go through 4 layers of stabilization. So we just hit the edge here. And it did a nice job. So that was just pretty much to show you that, you know, it can be done. You just have to prepare your work prior to doing it. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're gonna start with the bottom stabilizer. So if you haven't already done so, we wanna go ahead and place the heat bond on one piece of the bottom part, which is piece number 6. So for the bottom external, you need to cut 2 pieces. Only stabilize just the one. You also want to grab your stiffener, your bottom stiffener, which is piece number 4. So after you put your heat bond on, you want to go ahead, you want to grab some glue. We want to put glue on the stiffener. I don't want to get the glue on the table, but, well, it's too late. Okay, then go ahead and place right in the center. And then you want to go ahead and put more glue on the top here, just on the center. And then place this. And then you may or may not need to just put a couple of clips in here. Okay, so I'm going to just let it sit for a few minutes and then I'm going to stitch. So when you stitch, you want to stitch around the perimeter, all the way around. So let's go ahead and do that and be right back. Okay, so we have the bottom stitched. So one thing I didn't mention is the finishing, because the finishing is going to be different depending on what type of, whether it's leather, whether it's suede, whether it's, you know, just regular kind of like upholstery fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish mine with just some edge coat, black edge coat. Now, you won't have to do this throughout the process, only for a couple of pieces. Other than that, when it's all said and done, then you'll be able to kind of go through, use the edge coat. But with the bottom in particular, because we are placing this piece on top of another piece, we have to go ahead and edge coat this now because we won't be able to do it after it's stitched on. So let me just quickly, let's see, edge coat this. So I'm going to just like carefully, as careful as possible. So another thing, so if you're using a regular leather, or even this one, I could go through, sand this just to kind of make it as even as possible all the way around. Now, what I did with the black one, I did do that. I sanded it, I buffed it all the way around, all the pieces, every last piece. That, it can definitely be time consuming. Is it necessary to do it with suede? No, it's not. I think it's more so a habit with me. Is it necessary to do it with upholstery fabric? Not at all. In fact, you can't do it with upholstery fabric. So it's just kind of a habit, but I do recommend, even whether you're doing upholstery fabric, whatever, I do recommend you doing some type of edge finishing. So, and I'm just using this Phoebe's edge coat. So we're just gonna lightly and this dries pretty quickly, so, and you want to do all four sides. Okay, so I'm just going to let this dry really quickly and I'll be right back. So on the pattern, you're going to see this dotted line down here. This is the placement line. So when you see this throughout on the patterns, that is going to be your placement line, meaning that's where you need to lay opposing pattern pieces on top for stitching. So I didn't put the marking here, but you can. So what you would do is just using kind of like chalk or something that you can dust off, because you don't want it permanent, because this is on the outside of your fabric. So this is the external front piece number 8, which corresponds with this pattern piece. And down here, which is about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom, that's where we want to go ahead and we want to put like maybe some double-sided tape. If you don't have double-sided tape, I'm not a fan, because you could put glue, but I don't typically like to do the glue because it just seems like you have to run through too many needles, so that because it tends to get gunked up. But if you have needles to spare, go ahead. If not, you can just kind of place it on here using clips on the side. I like to use the double-sided tape because you can be a lot more precise when you're doing that. Okay, so we want to then remove the top layer. Okay, and now you want to go ahead and you want to place, I can see it better from this angle. place it right over. So something else to keep in mind. When you're using glue or you're using paint, it tends to kind of stretch the fabric a bit. So sometimes you're going through this, if you're using suede or leather. So if you're going through, you're like, wait a minute, I just kind of checked the spacing, or I checked the sizing, and now it seems to be a bit off because it tends to shift a bit. But don't worry about that. You can always just kind of like place it back and shift it back. So this is a bit over, so let's do this. Because you can always, after the fact, trim it down. Let's do this. Okay. So now what you want to do is you want to go ahead and stitch. What I'm going to do is just stitch on the pre-existing stitch line. That way I don't have an additional stitch line, but if you need to, you can stitch kind of across this edge here without falling off the edge. You just want to make sure your stitch lines are really straight. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we have this stitched on. And as you can see, so prior we had two pieces of the suede together, and now we just added in a third level of the suede. So again, there's three layers, and it went through the machine with no problem. It wasn't struggling at all whatsoever. So now what you want to do is you want to take the back external, which is piece number 7. Just make sure it's the external. And we're going to do the same thing. So again, the bottom of the external is that placement line. You need to make sure you notate that placement line on the front. And you're going to stitch just like we did with the front. You want to do that. Go ahead and use your double-sided tape if need be and stitch, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we have the front and the back attached. So if for some reason your bottom has stretched out, it's a simple fix. You can go in and just trim this off. Let's see. So you can either use your X-Acto knife, or you can use a rotary. See, we clean that and then just do the other side if you need to. But again, depending on what you're using, you may or may not need to. For some reason, once you add like the glue as well as the paint, it tends to kind of like shift it until it dries for the most part. Let me make sure this is absolutely clean. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through and use the edge coat on the ends one more time. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we have everything trimmed off. Now what you want to do is you want to take the front external flap, and this is the back. So we have the front here and we have the back here. We want to do the same thing. Now on the back, let me grab it. Okay, so on the back pattern piece, it says placement line. You want to make sure you note where this placement line is. Again, it's going to be about 1/4 of an inch. You want to go ahead and place here and do the same thing. We're going to stitch across the edge here, making sure you reinforce the ends. Okay, so we have the front flap attached. Now let's just set this to the side for a moment, and we're going to grab the gussets. So there should be 4 pieces for the gusset. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to put some glue. Well, if I can open it. All right, we're going to put some glue just on the canvas portion of the gusset. So what I'm going to do is something that I shouldn't. I'm going to kind of put the glue, I'm going to push it out to the edge here. I would usually just put some double-sided tape, but I'm being lazy. So, but I am, this is kind of strong. I am prepared to change the needles. And the reason I'm doing this, and specifically with the suede, because I want my edges to be very flat when I stitch. Okay, so now we're just going to go ahead and place the unstabilized half on top of here. And I'm just going to throw a couple of clips in here. So I'm then going to wait for about 10 minutes or so, and then I'm going to stitch. So when I stitch, I'm going to stitch all the way around, and we're going to do that for both sides. Okay, so we have the gussets stitched. Now what you want to do is you want to grab the internal zipper back that should already have the canvas as well as the heat bond and the pocket as well. So let's grab this and the zipper. So just for placement purposes, let me grab this. Okay. So this is going to be attached to the back here. Well, not attached to the back, but we're using the back as a placement for now. So we'll just kind of set this right here. You want to take your zipper with the zipper up. And we want to pull this down. And then we're going to use our double-sided tape. We want to slide this in. We're going to use our double-sided tape. And we're going to put the double-sided tape on this edge here. So let's kind of push this over. And if you don't have the double-sided tape, you can just kind of slide it in and then we're going to stitch it, or you can glue it, whichever you like. Double-sided tape is so much easier when you're doing things like this. It's quicker, it's less messy, and it holds it just fine, because essentially we need it to hold it until we stitch. We're going to end up cutting off the edge anyway. So let's go ahead and take this off. I always have the worst time. There we go. Okay. So you want to place this so that the pull hits right here where the little cut is. I probably should have slowly taken the tape off. All right, so you want to make sure you place the zipper and then the edge right up against each other. And when you're using the double-sided tape, you can it's easy to reposition if you need to, as opposed to the glue. It just gets a little messy. You can still do it, but this just makes it a lot easier. And you can get the double-sided tape, and I'll link it, but you can get this probably, I think it's like 4 or 5 rows of this in different widths for like $10 or so. Okay, so, and now what you want to do is you want to take the pocket and you want to place, let me turn this. So we're going to take this side of the pocket and place it here across the bottom using the double-sided tape again. So you want to line this up and do the same thing. Okay, now what you want to do is you want to go ahead and you want to stitch across the edge here. You want to stitch close to the edge, but make sure you don't hit the zipper teeth. So, and let's go ahead and do that, and I'll come right back. Okay, you also may need to change your presser foot to a zipper presser foot, just so that you don't run into the zipper teeth. Okay, so we have this side zipped in. Now what you want to do is tuck this under there. So you want to take the other side and do the same thing. So we're going to use the double-sided tape. But we're going to put the double-sided tape up top. Then take the other half and just press it up here. Okay, now what you want to do is you want to make sure you include this part here as well. You want to take and you want to stitch across. You don't have to be as concerned with getting close to the zipper here because we're going to put another piece on top. But just go ahead, stitch across here, and then you want to stitch down the sides. Don't worry about stitching across the bottom. So just here and across the sides. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we have the pouch constructed. And let's go ahead and trim off the excess. So if you need to, just go ahead and trim the zipper at this point. Okay, so you may have to, if you've used the same amount of like double-sided tape or glue, you may have to change your needle. If you don't want to do that yet, you can just take some alcohol and just kind of clear your needle. Just kind of clean it off. That'll take away any gunk that's built up. Or you may be perfectly fine and don't need to. Okay, so now what you want to do is you want to take the front flap internal. You want to place to position it. And then go ahead and get your double-sided tape. Put this on. You want to do it right across the top. And then place this across. Now keep in mind, the front flap is going to be wider than your little pouch here. And just so that you know you're doing it properly, you can kind of line this up. And then slide this right under. And then you want to go ahead and you want to stitch close to the edge right across here. Okay, so we have the zipper pouch installed. And now what you want to do is grab your bottom, the internal bottom, which is piece number 6. So we already completed the one for the outside. So this is essentially the same thing before the inside, but the difference is we're not going to have 2 pieces. So for this one, we doubled it up. In this one, we're only going to use 1 piece. So it's the same concept. We're going to line it up here. And keep in mind, it's going to be the bottom band, it's going to be longer than the pocket here. So essentially it should line up with this one here and line up with the front once we put that on. So let's go ahead using double-sided tape and just place the tape across the bottom here. Place the band across the bottom. We want to center it because again, it's going to be longer than this piece. And then go ahead and stitch across the bottom here. Okay, so we have the bottom stitched on. We want to do the same thing with the front. So this is the front internal. This is the bottom of the front internal. The same concept. We're putting 1/4 of an inch. We can go ahead and do the double-sided tape. And we're going to stitch across the bottom here. Oh, I ran out. And then stitch across the bottom. Okay, so we have the front internal stitched. Now we're going to go ahead and just set this to the side. Okay, so now what you want to do, you have the external. So this is going to be the front, and this is going to the front flap, and this is the actual front. So we're going to install the hardware. So we're going to install this hardware. So just make note of where on the actual pattern, which is this marking here. Just make sure you transfer that marking, as well as these 2 markings on this side for the additional hardware. All right, so let's go ahead. It's easier to kind of see on this side, especially depending on what type of fabric you're using, whether you're using leather or suede or what have you. All right, so I'm just going to kind of mark here. Let's see, we need to kind of center this up. I'm going to, let's see, kind of put a mark in here. And then the other one right here. So I'm going to start, because what happens, this tends to like shift if you try to do all four at the same time. So I'm going to take my X-Acto knife. So when you push the X-Acto knife in, it's going to split it, so you don't want to push it in too far. So you want to turn it around and do the same thing. We're going to be putting it in on the opposite side, but we're just going to put it here just to kind of like start it. Okay, so then, let's see, let me grab, and we want to measure this. So this is like 1 inch. Maybe a little shorter. So if we have this. So once you kind of set those in, you then want to take and mark on this side. And then do the same thing. Then turn this around. It's a little wonky. Now we want to turn this around. And you want to just verify it. Okay. So then you want to take and you want to put the little pieces on, and this is going to secure it in the back. And bend these. And then do the other side. Okay. And just make sure it sits flush. Okay, so we have this hardware installed. Now let's go ahead and just do the other side. So we're going to essentially do the same thing, but with these pieces. So with these pieces, it has kind of like an open part at the bottom. You want to make sure when you install it that the open part sits below. So we're going to essentially do the same thing. So you just want to kind of mark it. And you want to make sure it's straight. And kind of push it through. And then turn it. All right, just push it all the way through. Then put the backing on. Just make sure it's sitting kind of flush. Okay, so now what you want to do is just insert the other one. We're going to do the same thing. And while we're at it, we're going to go ahead and, so the way you just did these, we're going to leave the other one because it's a little different. So we're going to wait to do that one. But we're going to also install the other one over here. Just make sure you have your marking. And then you're going to install these two. And again, remember, you're going to install them in the downward position on this side as well. We're going to do that for all three, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we have the hardware installed. So now what you want to do is you want to grab, so there are that come in the kit, if you decide to get the kit, there are two different shapes. So it's the square shape and it's the shape that kind of comes to like a little angle. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use these for the straps and I'm going to use these for the front. So what you want to do is you want to install these. You're going to need like a small screwdriver. Okay, So we have these separated. And so what you want to do, you have your marking and you just, where's the awl? So just to find your positioning, you want to poke this through and just put a little marking right here. And this isn't going to show because we have to cut the middle portion out. So what you're going to do is you're going to place this here. So when you press down, it's going to show you these right here. I can just kind of mark these. Let me do this again just to make sure it's straight. I'm going to stand up and look at it. Okay, so you want to make sure it's straight, and then you just want to press because it's going to give you indentations right here and right here. So then you just want to put a little mark here and a little mark here. So now what you want to do is you want to put 2 holes on this side, because what you'll have to do is push this through. And if you take a look at this, it's very short. So just make the 2 holes and then attach the back and then screw it back together. So we want to do that for this front here, as well as the internal. So you want to do the exact same thing with the internal. So if you use the one that's just square all the way around or a rectangle, then you want to do the exact same thing with this one, because ultimately it's going to line up. So the front and the back will line up together, but we're not going to actually cut it out until we get the 2 together. In fact, I'll show you. So if you see, clearly I carried a purse, but you have this part, which is the inside, this part, which is the outside. So ultimately they're going to line up, but this is 2 different pieces, like 2 different sets, but they're just lined up to one another. So go ahead and do the same thing. Make sure it's centered, do the indentation, do the marking, and then the holes. So with the holes, you'll probably have to use your awl, or if you have a punch kit, you could use that as well. But you just have to make sure they're small, because you only need a very small hole for both of those. So let's go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we have all the hardware installed. Now what we want to do is we want to take your X-Acto knife and you want to cut the opening here, like just cut through the middle of this. Okay, so we have the fabric cut out of the hardware. Now what you want to do is you want to kind of open this flap and you want to put the front stiffener on. So we're going to glue this on and we're going to let it sit for about 15 minutes. We're also going to go ahead and glue the flap stiffener on. as well as the top stiffener. So we're going to glue that, glue all three of these pieces. We're going to kind of secure it the best way you can, either using your craft clips or whatever clips you have, and we'll let it sit for about 15-20 minutes or so. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so while we are allowing this to kind of dry for a little bit, let's go ahead and grab the loops. And these are going to be the loops that go here. And this is the internal front flap. So we already made the markings. In fact, I think I already cut this open. So you just want to just like make, did I cut it open? Yeah, just make slits. So we're going to make 4 slits. And you have these 4 loops. Let's go ahead and put double-sided tape on 2 of them. Okay, with right sides together. I'm going to make sure they're even. My hands are so sticky. Okay, so now what you want to do is you want to stitch around the perimeter. And you want to stitch close to the edge without falling off the edge. You want to do that on all 4 sides with both pieces. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we have the loops stitched. Now what you want to do is you want to take the inner portion, the lining, for better lack of a word. All right, so we're going to take one end. So you already have your slits here. You're going to take one end and maneuver it through. Let me grab something to pull it. I'm trying to grab this. I'll just let me. I don't want to pierce my leather, my suede. Okay, so you're going to take one end. You're going to pull it through. And then you want to take the other end and pull that one through as well. I swear it's not that hard, but I don't want to break my fingernail trying to get it through here, and it's tight. Okay, so you have both pieces in, and now what you want to do is you want to fold both of these down, and you're going to stitch across both ends. And so you're going to be stitching them flat. So you're going to do that on both ends. And then what you want to do is go ahead and do the same thing for the other side. So let's go ahead and stitch, and then we'll repeat the process over here. Okay, so we have the belt loops constructed. Now what you want to do is you want to grab the external, and let's go ahead and kind of clean this out. And this is from the stabilizer that we put on. So just kind of do the same thing, and it makes it a lot easier because this is essentially paper, just like a heavy paper. So let's just go ahead and clean this out. Okay, so now what you want to do is you want to take the straps, and so these are going to be the straps that go from the back of the bag around to the front. And on the ends of each one is going to be the hardware. So what you want to do is you want to include the stabilizer just to kind of give it some weight, but you don't want the stabilizer to go beyond the hardware, as well as the end, because we're going to be folding the end under and stitching. So let's just take one piece and just kind of measure it out. So if the hardware is going on here, and so another thing to take note of, the hardware, if you're using this side, this only applies if you're using the kind that's angled. If you're using the hardware that's straight across, if you're using the hardware that's straight across, you can disregard this. But if you're using the one that's angled, you want to make sure that you don't put it all the way to the end, because then you'll have to trim off the sides and it's kind of a headache. So you want to make sure you install it here as opposed to all the way to the end. Okay, so let's kind of measure this out. We don't want the stabilizer. We want to start the stabilizer about here. And at the end, we want to cut off about 1.5 inches. So that's going to put us about here. So you want to do this for both pieces. Now again, you may not need the stabilizer, but if you are using a fabric that you do need the stabilizer, then there you have it. Okay, so let's go ahead, and on the wrong side, we're going to, let's see, measure this down from here. We're going to glue this on, then place the other side on top, and then we're going to stitch. Let it dry for about 10 minutes and then stitch. You're going to stitch around the perimeter. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we have these straps glued together. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to stitch around the perimeter. And make sure when you're stitching, you stitch close to the edge and make it as uniform as possible. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we have the straps stitched. Now what I'm going to do, and of course this is optional and it's going to depend on what you're using, whether you're using leather, suede, upholstery fabric, whatever. I'm going to go ahead and edge coat the sides here. And I'm only going to edge coat this side and this side because we're going to like fold this under on the back side, of course, and we're going to stitch. So we just need to do the edges here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. But in the meantime, I'm going to do that and let it dry. And then we're going to repeat the process that we just did with the small straps with the shoulder straps. So we're going to do it the exact same way. We're going to add the glue, put the stabilizer in between, glue them together, let them sit for a while, and then we're going to stitch. But for right now, let's go ahead and edge coat and put these together, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we have the straps edge coated and dried. Now what you want to do is you want to remove the little piece off the hardware. And you want to kind of pull it out a bit. And you want to, let's see, slide it under here, like so. And you want to slide under probably an inch. Yeah. Once you do that, go ahead and slide the securing piece back on and then close it up. Make sure when you do that, it's going to be flush on the other side. Let me push this down. Okay, so once you do that, take this other half, slide it under here, and then you want to, I'm just going to go ahead and clip it for now, but you're going to secure the stitch. So you're going to stitch, let's see, the sun is hitting it in a weird way. Let's see if you can see this. So I slid this, I'll do this again. You have this under and it's secured under here. Then you want to slide this part under here and you're going to stitch right across here. But I'm just going to do this one for now. So do the other one the same way, and then you want to stitch down here on both sides. Okay, so we have these stitched in, and now what you want to do is attach the hardware to the ends. And we're going to attach it the same way we did this one. The only difference is where you position it. So you want to put it to where this edge here lines up with the edge here. So just place it here, and the same thing, we want to press to make that indentation, and then it tells us where we need to place our holes. So go ahead, install this hardware the same way we did this one, and we want to do that on both sides. I'm going to go ahead and do that and be right back. Okay, so we have, let me put this on mute. We have the hardware installed. Now let's just go ahead and do the same thing. We're going to use our X-Acto knife and just cut out the little openings in here. So once we do that, I want to go back to the strap, go ahead and stitch down all 4 sides, and then I'm going to go ahead and edge coat. Again, the edge coating process is optional. I think it makes it look nicer and looks cleaner. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to cut this open and then stitch down the sides. Okay, so we have everything, all the pieces constructed. We have the belt stitched, and I went ahead and just edge coated. So what I'm going to do now, and this part is optional, because what you can do is you can kind of turn the back over and just kind of see how it's going to sit. So you have the, but if you want it a lot more stable, and keep in mind, once you put the gussets in, it's going to kind of form into more of a box. But I want mine to be even harder. So what I'm going to do, and what you can do is, so we have this stabilizer here. We have it at the top here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a stabilizer here as well as here. But when you add that stabilizer, you want to make sure you're adding it here and a little further up here as well as here, because you ultimately are going to have to stitch, and you want to make sure when you're stitching, because we're using a domestic machine, that you're not hitting the edges. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of cut the stabilizer, same stabilizer that I used here, but we're going to kind of position it over the back as well as over the front. So let's go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I added the additional stabilizer. Of course, this part is optional, and if you have a heavier leather or a heavier Even if it's a very thick suede, you wouldn't need to do it. It's completely optional, but it also can be done, making sure you remember this, on a domestic machine. You just have to make sure you bring the stabilizer in. So essentially what you're stitching is just the sides. All right, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go ahead and put these two together. And we're going to glue, match up the edges. And it's really important too to make sure, so you can stick something in here just to kind of make sure it goes all the way through. And then you're matching up the edges through the sides as well as here. And we're going to glue this. But what I recommend you do is glue this side first and then work your way down, but don't stick it together yet. And then put this side together first and then go through and start to press it as you go. So again, start here, coat it with the glue, but press it and use the clips here first and then press it as you go. All right, let's go ahead and glue this together. And again, it's right side or wrong side to wrong side. Okay, so we're letting this dry for about 20 minutes or so. And I'm going to be honest, like, this is only based off of the type of glue that I'm using. I will link the glue that I typically use, which next time I'm going to buy it in bulk because I wasn't able to get it this time. But it dries like literally instantly. And it's just a lot nicer to work with. So typically you can let it dry and let it sit till it gets tacky for about 5 minutes, but I'm gonna let this one sit for like 20 minutes. So after I do that, I'm gonna go through and stitch all the way around. So when you stitch, you can see here, you wanna make sure you lift this up and just stitch right across the edge all the way around. So let's go ahead and let this sit for a few more minutes and then we'll go ahead and stitch. Okay, so right here is where I thought I could get through, where's the, oh, so I thought I could get through with it before my thread broke, but I knew going all around, going through all of this glue that I have on here, that my thread was gonna break. So I'm just going to re-thread my machine and then finish right around here. Okay, so we have the stitching, everything completed. Now, the second to the last thing we have to do is we have to install the gusset. Now, I know gussets are a pain in the butt for most people. I get it. I get it. I do. And it also makes it more challenging depending on what type of machine you have. If you have a long arm machine, it's like you can get through it like crazy. I have with my machine and a lot of machines, this portion comes off. So you can kind of get in there and maneuver in there. Majority of people will not have that, I don't believe. So here is an option. So you can go ahead and let's do this. And this is what I would recommend. I would recommend starting at the bottom. So you have the center here and you want to line the center of the gusset up with this, the end of the bottom, but it's the end of the bottom that's going toward the flap. I hope that makes sense. And so you want to line that up here. So you can either put the clips in, or you can put the double-sided tape, whichever works for you. So this is what I would recommend doing. Stitching here first. So you're going to go as far over from here to here. And then once you do that, you're going to go ahead, and I recommend doing this side first. After you do that, line the sides up. And then just as you go down, clamp it or double-sided tape, and then stitch, and then do the other side. Now, it will take some maneuvering getting into the corners. So just brace yourself for that. This is probably the most challenging part of the process. But I do have an option. I do have an option that works really well. Get E6000 glue. So E6000 glue, I'm not sure if you've used it or not, but it is a permanent bonding glue. It's flexible, you can paint it, and once it solidifies, and what I do tell you is that you need to wait at least 24 hours for it to be completely solidified. And then you don't have to worry about trying to stitch in like the little teeny tinies of the corners and like pulling your hair out. So it's your option. I'm going to do this because I know a majority of the people are going to probably have a challenge getting into that little curve. So I will use this E6000. Also, I think I mentioned it earlier, that machine, it's the shoe patcher machine. It's the leather shoe patcher machine, and it has like the long cylinder. I have that machine. A lot of times if I am working with a bag that is smaller and I really cannot get in that little crevice with either of my shoes, or either of my machines, I use that $99 hand cranked. It works wonders, especially in situations like that. So I did do a quick little kind of like a review on it on my YouTube. I'll link that as well. But what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the process that you want to do if you're using the E6000. And the good thing about this is that we've already put the stitching in, so it's not like the stitching will be missing, so it won't look like, no one will be able to tell. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to put this in. All right. So we want to be careful with this because this isn't like the other glue and like the normal leather glue. So we want to get this and put this only where it belongs. So we're going to do the same thing. well, you know what, let's be on the safe side. We'll only use and put this here, not on here. So let's go ahead and spread the love.
Motion detected at front door.
You know, let's see if I have gloves, because I do want to use my hands to do this. You don't have to. You can use like one of the wool daubers. You can use a Q-tip, but I just want to be able to feel it. Okay, so ooh. Look at me being careless. Okay. Okay, so another thing, it dries kind of fast, so you don't want it to just kind of sit. All right, so again, we have the little spacing here. We're gonna apply this here. I'm just gonna go ahead and put a clip and then a clip in here. So if you do get some of the glue on, don't worry about it. As long as you don't wait an extended period of time, you'll be able to get it off with no problem. So then what you want to do is kind of put it here. You want to kind of go to the top. And then I like to put one on the side. Oh, we got a little glue in there. Don't worry about that. And then do the same thing with this other side. And you can still adjust it. And also if you get some of the glue on, like I said, as long as you're not waiting 24 hours, you'll be able to get it off. So don't Don't stress out if you feel like you're not moving fast enough. Comes right off. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just kind of let this sit for about 15 minutes. And then I'm going to go through, and if I have any glue that I need to get off, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And also, if you need to make any adjustments, go ahead and do them now. So if for whatever reason you get to a point and it's dry and you're like, oh my God, I have a piece sticking out here, don't worry about it. You can trim it off. Now, if you are using the glue, well, you know what, regardless, I would always recommend finishing your edge. So if you need to trim your edge at all, if you need to put the edge coat, if you need to buff it, if you need to sand it, I would definitely do that. But let's take it one step at a time. Let's go ahead and do the other side, and then we're going to let it dry. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side the exact same way. You're going to find that middle point, start there, and then just kind of like press your gusset in. Okay, so the glue is dry on the sides, if you decided to use the glue. So if, of course, if you didn't use the glue and you just went ahead and stitched it with whatever machine you have, then we'll skip this part. But for those that did, what you want to do now is you need to trim any of the glue off the sides. And just be really careful. I would use the X-Acto knife. Or if you were extremely cautious when you did it, you may not need to. But you want to go ahead and trim off the sides and then give it a good sand. So you just want to use the sand. This isn't necessary, but I just feel like it gives it a better straight, clean edge. And then you want to go ahead and use the edge coat and just paint it. So once you scrape any of the glue off, sand it down, and then edge coat it. Once you do that, we'll be back. And also, in the meantime, you can go ahead and edge coat the rest of the bag as well. So you want to edge coat around here and around the top. So all the exposed parts that you haven't already edge coated. So let's go ahead and do that and then come right back. Okay, so we have the edge coating done. Everything is dry. Now what you want to do is take the strap. So of course I've already done the strap, and the strap is done the same way these straps are done. So what you want to do is you want to feed this through these loops that's on the flap. And you want to kind of see how comfortable it is for you. I didn't put like the markings where you need to put the screws, just because it's going to be different for everyone. And also keep in mind that prior, and I think I mentioned this before, the strap is based off of where I wanted the strap to be for the design of the bag. But if you want a longer strap, a shorter strap, you know, it's your choice. You can cut it, or you can make it longer. So it's your choice. So what I would recommend is just kind of putting a clamp in wear it, put it on your shoulder, see how it fits, and that will determine, you know, how much you want snapped or not. So I'm going to go about here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a hole here and then the other hole. So you have to remember, let me set this down. You have this part under here. So you need to make sure they're even. I'm going to put a second little clamp in here. Let me just use this one. So I have my Chicago screws. Let's see. And I will link this kit because it has a variety of sizes, which comes in really handy. I actually appreciate this. Let's see. Well, we'll just do these two. Okay, so you want to put your hole and then a second hole. You want it to be roughly 2.5 inches apart. So I'm going to go ahead, punch my holes. You can punch your holes. I have the arbor press, which allows me to punch holes through like really thick leather, fabric, whatever. But you can go ahead and use your awl. You'll just have to maneuver it through. Just make sure they meet up on both sides. You're going to install 2.5 inches apart. So one here, the other one 2.5 inches apart. And then go ahead and screw that and you are done. So let's go ahead and do that and I'll be right back.